And I'm Rocky Romero. I welcome you to beautiful downtown Miami. We're in the middle of a hurricane, although it's not affecting here, but certainly the whole state is up in alarm about that. And I come to you as an investor for the last 30 years, consultant for as many years, coaching businesses for the last 15 years. And I started a mentoring program 5 years ago. And currently, I'm running a program about $1 million business challenge and opportunity. And certainly, the question I ask myself, what can I glean from this? What can I take? And of course, empathy is one of those things that's a really wonderful skill set to have as a person, as a human being, as a coach, as a consultant, as an investor. And I'm starting to find that there is some gem in this that she dealt into it, which I call that space that's called time under tension. Time under tension is that space between stimulus and response. It's that space when, as human beings, we're used to fight or flight, those situations. And of course, there's some other situations that fight, flight, and you freeze because you don't know what to do. Then there's fight, flight, freeze, and focus, meaning that you focus on taking some action, proaction, rather than reaction. And there's a fifth area. So there's fight, flight, freeze, focus, and a higher level of flow. And it's that discovery that I thought, and I say discovery, but it's new to me, may not be new to any of you, but it's a discovery for me because I always knew about fight or flight. That's instinctive. Freeze came along. Focus is something that was not proactive, but flow is something that people can get in a state of flow that they are able to be not only proactive, like focus, but also encapsulate effortless, timeless, and what's called selfless, when any blocks or any critical thinking gets out of the way and we just react and act. High performance athletes do that. And so we call this space time under tension because there is some tension there. And whether it's a corporate setting or individual setting or business setting, or any time that you interact with people, or even just out in nature, there is perhaps a time under tension that we fit into. So how do we get from fight or flight, which is our instinct, to a flow state? And what's interesting is that she mentioned four different components. The first one is notice. Notice what's around, and all of a sudden, instead of fight or flight or freeze, you could in freeze mode you could probably be noticing, but maybe more reactive or just still. And in a focus state, you can notice what's going on, to be able to get data, get information, be able to see and understand and interpret what is going on. And the second stage is breathing. What's interesting about breathing is that it immediately lowers our heart rate. It calms us down. Deep breathing and normal breathing. When people get into fight or flight mode, they stop breathing. And maybe in freeze mode, they stop breathing. So maybe when you get into focus or in a flow mode, you're breathing normally. This is something that our body just needs to just breathe. And the third component is to consider. Her interpretation is consider options, consider what this means. And the fourth is explore, get curious. And that's the ultimate emotion, if you will, for focus and flow. Now, focus, you can get curious and look at different options. And in flow, you can be very curious, but then you're flowing, you're timeless, you're effortless. You just move as if it's normal. And anything that requires risk or some sort of barrier is gone away. In focus, you might still have that barrier. And that seems to be the difference between the two. For those of you that have been in a flow mode when something went tremendously well, either as an athlete or in business, I think it's starting to translate into business. When you were in a situation that everything went well, it was effortless, time just flew, time didn't exist, and you could take any action and everything was fine. Not too much action. There's a difference between skill and capability. So if you have a skill, then you want to have just enough skill to do that with a little bit of risk. But if you cross the border and don't have those capabilities, then that's the tension of those two parameters. So I'm finding that this is a very great way to express how to best get into a flow state. And even a focus state, but a flow state, which is much more proactive, much more positive. And it's very much, as you can understand it, I think it's more physiological, although she does mention that there's a feeling state, but it's physiological first, then a feeling, then you can respond. And so that's what I call time under tension. And if you start to notice it with different interactions with people, there's that time under tension between stimulus and response, and it's called that space.